So, let me get this straight, Bob said, looking over my very detailed sketches of the proposed satellite array. You want how many dishes? All of them, Bob, I said. Every size, every shape, every freaking color. I want dishes pointed north, south, east, west, up, down, sideways. I want antennas sticking out of every possible surface. I want wires, cables, the whole 9 yards. I want it to look like NASA threw up on my house. Bob stared at me for a minute, his eyes wide. Then he started to laugh. A big, booming laugh that shook his whole body. You're freaking nuts, man, he said, wiping a tear from his eye. I love it. But why? Let's just say, I said with a grin, I have a disagreement with my HOA, and this is my way of expressing myself. Dude, Bob said when I was finished, you are my hero. This is going to be the most epic install I've ever done. But, you know, this is going to be, like, completely useless, right? I mean, you're only going to be able to watch, like, 1 channel at a time. Oh, I know, Bob, I said, waving my hand dismissively. It's not about the channels, man. It's about the principle. It's about the statement. It's about sticking it to the freaking HOA. So, I'm up on the freaking roof, right? Like some kind of goddamn antenna adjuster, because these HOA clowns have a problem with my reception. You believe this crap? I'm twisting this thing, I'm climbing around, I'm risking life and limb, for what? So I can watch the freaking game. And these busybody bastards, they're complaining about the look of it. The look! It's a freaking antenna. It's supposed to, you know, get a signal, not win a goddamn beauty contest. I'm Mike, by the way. Mike O'Malley. And I'm what you might call a sports enthusiast. Okay, fine, I'm a freaking fanatic. I love my teams, I love my games, and I love watching them. On free, over-the-air TV. Yeah, that's right, I said free. I ain't paying some cable company $100 a month to watch commercials and reality shows. I got an antenna. A classic, old-school, rabbit ears on steroids TV antenna. It ain't pretty, I'll give you that. It's all metal and wires and, well, it looks like an antenna. But it works. I get all the local channels crystal clear, no freaking monthly bill. And that's all that matters, right? Wrong. Apparently, in Crystal Creek Meadows, and don't even get me started on that name, there's no freaking creek, and the only meadows are these pathetic little patches of grass they call lawns. Having a functional, perfectly legal TV antenna is a freaking crime. A crime against aesthetics. It all started, like these HOA horror stories always do, with a freaking letter. This official-looking thing on fancy paper, with the Crystal Creek Meadows logo on it. A picture of I don't even know, a perfectly manicured lawn with a freaking gazebo? Anyway, this letter, it says my antenna is a violation. A violation! Dear Mr. O'Malley, it starts, all formal and condescending. The Crystal Creek Meadows Homeowners Association has received complaints regarding the unsightly television antenna on your property. Said antenna is deemed to be outdated, aesthetically displeasing, and in violation of community standards. Blah, blah, freaking blah. Aesthetically displeasing? It's an antenna, not the freaking Mona Lisa. It's supposed to get a signal, not win a goddamn art award. And then, of course, they send out their enforcer. Mr. freaking Snootwell. This guy, he's like the poster child for HOA pettiness. He's got this clipboard, see, and this little tape measure, and he's walking around my yard like he's freaking inspecting a crime scene. Mr. O'Malley, he says, his voice all high and mighty. This antenna, it's unacceptable. Unacceptable? I yell back. It's a freaking antenna. What's unacceptable about it? It's unsightly, he says, like he's reciting from the HOA handbook of bull crap. It's outdated. It detracts from the community's aesthetic appeal. Aesthetic appeal? I'm losing it now. What aesthetic appeal? This whole place looks like a freaking golf course. All the houses are the same, all the lawns are the same, everything is the same, and my antenna is the problem? I went on to tell him how I need it, and other people rely on antennas too. He just stares at me, this blank, condescending look on his face. We're striving for a modern, streamlined look in Crystal Creek Meadows, Mr. O'Malley, he says. Antennas are relics of the past. They're eyesores. Eyesores. I wanted to shove that freaking clipboard. Well, you get the picture. But I kept it, mostly, together. I tried to reason with him. Told him I needed the antenna to get the local channels, that I wasn't paying for cable, that it was my freaking right to watch TV. He just kept quoting the bylaws, chapter and verse, like he was some kind of freaking HOA priest. And then he hands me this order to remove the antenna. Within 2 weeks. Or else fines and legal action. So naturally, I had to go to one of these freaking HOA meetings. You ever been to one of these things? It's like a freaking cult meeting, only instead of worshiping some weird deity, they worship uniformity. The meeting room is in the community center, which is basically a glorified shed with fold-in chairs and a coffee machine that probably hasn't been cleaned since the freaking Nixon administration. And the board? Oh man, the board! A bunch of Stepford wives and retired accountants, all looking like they'd rather be getting a root canal than listening to me complain about my freaking antenna. And then there she was, Beatrice freaking Priss, the HOA president, the queen of the Prisses. This woman, she's like the human embodiment of a HOA rulebook, uptight, obsessed with modernizing everything, even if it means making it worse, and probably wears freaking pastels to bed. She's got this look on her face, like she's constantly smelling something bad. And I'm pretty sure that something bad is me and my antenna. Mr. O'Malley, she says, her voice all icy and condescending. Your antenna has been brought to our attention. She says antenna like it's a freaking disease. It's a TV antenna, Miss Priss, I say, trying to keep it together, but my voice is already getting loud. It's for, watching TV. It's an eyesore, Mr. O'Malley, she declares like she's freaking announcing the end of the world. It's lowering property values. It's outdated technology. We're in the 21st century, Mr. O'Malley. No one uses antennas anymore. Lady, I yell back, I use an antenna, and plenty of other people use antennas. It's free TV. You got a problem with free? It's not in keeping with the aesthetic of Crystal Creek Meadows, she says, her voice getting all screechy. We're striving for a modern, streamlined look. Your antenna, it's disruptive. Disruptive? I'm losing it now. It's a freaking antenna. It's just sitting there. What's it gonna do, huh? Get up and walk around, start disrupting things? It's attracting undesirable elements, she says, and I swear to God I thought she was gonna say aliens. Undesirable elements? I yell. You mean like birds? Are you freaking kidding me? The other board members, they're all just sitting there, looking like they want to disappear. Except for this one guy in the back, who's trying not to laugh. I think he's on my side. Secretly. The antenna, Beatrice says, slamming her little gavel down, which, by the way, looked like it came out of a freaking dollhouse. Must be removed. You have 1 week, Mr. O'Malley, and you are hereby fined. Fined! For an antenna, these people. I swear. I walked out of that meeting ready to freaking explode. 1 week, huh? Fine. 1 week. Beatrice Priss and her HOA goons thought they could tell me what to do with my own goddamn property? They thought they could take away my freaking football games? They had another thing coming. And that That thing was gonna be big. And it was gonna be shiny. And it was gonna make him wish they'd never messed with Mike O'Malley and his freaking antenna. 1 week. That's all the time Beatrice Priss, in her infinite pastel-clad wisdom, had given me to remove my antenna. My perfectly good, perfectly functional antenna. The antenna that brought me the sweet, sweet nectar of free over-the-air television. Like I was gonna do that. Remove my antenna? I ranted, pacing my living room like a caged badger. Over my dead, rabbit-eared body, these people, they're freaking lunatics. It's a goddamn antenna. What century are we living in? I was done. Done with being polite. Done with trying to reason with these HOA clowns. They wanted a war? Oh, I'd give them a freaking war. A war of reception. A war of signals. A war of... well, a war of antennas, goddammit. I wasn't just gonna keep my old antenna, though. No, sir. That wouldn't be nearly dramatic enough. I needed to make a statement. A big statement. A statement that would make Beatrice Priss choke on her freaking HOA rulebook. And while they were talking about changing the rules, they hadn't done it yet. My weapon of choice? The internet, baby. I started researching. HOA rules, FCC regulations, local ordinances, and most importantly, satellite dishes. Yeah, you heard me right. Satellite dishes. Those big, round, ugly things that people used to use to get TV before everyone switched to freaking cable. I spent hours down this rabbit hole, man, learning about different types of antennas, frequencies, signal strength. It was like getting a freaking PhD in reception technology. And then, bingo. I found it. The loophole, the golden ticket, the freaking law. See, the HOA, in their infinite stupidity, had gone on and on about unsightly antennas. They'd ranted about the aesthetic of the neighborhood, about how my old school rabbit ears were disrupting the freaking harmony, or some crap like that. But they hadn't said a word about satellite dishes. Probably figured everyone was using cable, right? Like we're all living in the freaking future or something. And then there was this little gem. The over-the-air reception devices rule. A freaking federal law, people. Passed by Congress. Saying that HOAs can't restrict your right to receive broadcast signals. They can't tell you can't put up an antenna or a satellite dish as long as it's for, get this, receiving broadcast signals. Receiving broadcast signals, I muttered, a slow, evil grin spreading across my face. Oh, I'll be receiving signals, all right. I'll be receiving signals from freaking everywhere. The plan, when it came to me, was a thing of beauty, a masterpiece of passive-aggressive genius. Operation Satellite Storm was born. I wasn't just going to put up a satellite dish. I was going to put up a lot of satellite dishes. And antennas. And, well, anything else I could find that looked vaguely like it could receive some kind of signal. I was going to turn my house into a freaking communications hub. A signal-receiving powerhouse. Well, you get the picture. I'd have dishes of all sizes, all shapes, all colors, pointed in every freaking direction. I'd have antennas sticking out of every possible surface. I'd have wires and cables and goddamn gizmos everywhere. It would be a chaotic, beautiful, utterly ridiculous mess. And I'd claim, with a perfectly straight face, that it was all for scientific research, for weather monitoring, for communication experiments, and of course for receiving broadcast signals. Because technically that's exactly what it would be doing. I mean, some of those dishes would probably be pointed at actual satellites, right? I could already picture Beatrice Priss's face. The horror, the outrage, the sheer, unadulterated fury. It was going to be freaking glorious. This wasn't just about watching TV anymore. It was about freedom. It was about the right to have whatever the hell kind of antenna you want on your own goddamn property. It was about, well, It was about sticking it to the freaking man. First things first, I needed to make it all legal. I walked into the city's office with blueprints. I need a permit to put up some stuff, I say, grinning. The man behind the counter raises a curious eyebrow. And that would be communication equipment, I say, a lot of it. He looks through my papers. For a house? I nod. And this is all legal? Yep, all for receiving signals. He shrugs and stamps my papers. Good luck, sir. Next, I needed to find someone crazy enough to install this array. I found him online. A guy named, you guessed it, Bob. Seriously, what is it with Bob's and my freaking HOA problems? Bob's company, Signal Solutions, specialized in solving signal problems. So, let me get this straight, Bob said, looking over my very detailed sketches of the proposed satellite array. You want how many dishes? All of them, Bob, I said. Every size, every shape, every freaking color. I want dishes pointed north, south, east, west, up, down, sideways. I want antennas sticking out of every possible surface. I want wires, cables, the whole 9 yards. I want it to look like NASA threw up on my house. Bob stared at me for a minute, his eyes wide. Then he started to laugh. A big, booming laugh that shook his whole body. You're freaking nuts, man, he said, wiping a tear from his eye. I love it, but why? Let's just say, I said with a grin, I have a disagreement with my HOA, and this is my way of expressing myself. I told him the whole story, the antenna, the complaints, Beatrice freaking Priss and her obsession with note-having antennas. Dude, Bob said when I was finished, you are my hero. This is going to be the most epic install I've ever done. But, this is going to be, completely useless, right? I mean, you're only going to be able to watch, one channel at a time. Oh, I know, Bob, I said, waving my hand dismissively. It's not about the channels, man. It's about the principle. It's about the statement. It's about sticking it to the freaking HOA. You got it, Bob said, chuckling. Let's build a freaking monument to signal reception. And so, construction, or rather, installation, began. Trucks arrived, carrying a freaking arsenal of satellite dishes. Big ones, small ones, round ones, square ones. Even one of those old-school, giant mesh dishes that looked like it belonged in a freaking science museum. We had antennas of every shape and size. Yagi antennas, dipole antennas, those little rabbit ear antennas. You name it, we had it. Bob and his crew swarmed over my house, mountain dishes on the roof, on the walls, on poles in the yard. They ran cables, strung wires, and connected. Well, I wasn't entirely sure what they were connecting, but it looked impressive. And just for good measure, I added some scientific instruments. A weather vane shaped like a rocket ship, an anemometer, whatever the hell that is, that spun around like crazy in the slightest breeze. A giant thermometer that displayed the temperature in both Fahrenheit and Celsius, because science. The neighbors, of course, were losing their freaking minds. They'd gather on their sidewalks, staring at my house, their jaws hanging open, looking like they were witnessing a freaking alien invasion. What the hell is he doing? I heard one whisper. Is he starting a radio station? Another asked. He's finally gone crazy, a third said, shaking his head. The HOA finally broke him. And, of course, there was the HOA inspection. Mr. Snootwell himself showing up with his freaking clipboard and his smug little face. Mr. O'Malley! He yelled, looking like he was about to have a stroke. What is the meaning of this? It's a communications hub, Mr. Snootwell, I said, all calm and innocent. For research, and of course for receiving broadcast signals. You know, as per the freaking FCC regulations. I pulled out a copy of the over-the-air reception devices rule, which I now carried with me at all times like a goddamn talisman. But, there's so many of them, he sputtered, pointing at the forest of dishes and antennas. Gotta get good reception, Mr. Snootwell, I said with a shrug. Lots of interference in this neighborhood, you know, from all the beige. He stared at me, speechless. He looked at the dishes, at the antennas, at the freaking weather vane. Then he looked at the FCC rule, then back at me. He clearly had no freaking clue what to do. He mumbled something about consulting with the board and retreated, looking utterly defeated. And as I watched my communications hub take shape, man, I felt good. I felt vindicated. I felt like I was finally sticking it to the man, to the HOA, to Beatrice freaking Priss. This wasn't just about an antenna anymore. It was about freedom. It was about the right to have whatever the hell kind of receiving devices you want on your own goddamn property. It was about, well, it was about making a freaking statement. And that statement was loud and clear. Don't mess with Mike O'Malley and don't mess with his freaking TV. The grand unveiling of my communications hub, my glorious, ridiculous, HOA-defying masterpiece of satellite dishes and antennas, was everything I'd dreamed of and more. My house looked like a freaking, well, it looked like a cross between a NASA tracking station and a junkyard. But it was my junkyard, and it was sending a clear message. Don't mess with my TV reception. And Beatrice Priss? Oh, Beatrice. She arrived like a pastel-clad hurricane, ready to unleash a storm of HOA fury. "What have you done?" she shrieked, her voice echoing across Crystal Creek meadows, probably shattering every perfectly placed garden gnome within a 5-mile radius. I was standing in my driveway wearing a lab coat, because why not? And holding a clipboard, because science. Looking all calm and professional. "Good afternoon, Beatrice," I said, my voice dripping with mock politeness. "You're admiring my communications hub, I presume?" "Communications hub?" she sputtered, pointing a trembling finger at the array of dishes and antennas. This is outrageous! You've turned your house into a NASA control center." "It's for research, Beatrice," I explained, like I was talking to a particularly slow child. "Very important research into weather patterns and atmospheric conditions and, you know, signals. Gotta get those signals, Beatrice, for science." "It's an eyesore, O'Malley," she yelled, her face turning a shade of purple I didn't even know was possible. It's hideous. It's lowering property values." "It's perfectly legal, Beatrice," I countered, tapping my clipboard with a fake scientific instrument. It was actually a meat thermometer. "As per the FCC's over-the-air reception devices rule, I have a right to receive broadcast signals. And of course," I added with a wink, "to conduct my research." "Research?" she scoffed. "What kind of research requires that?" She gestured wildly at the array, like it was some kind of alien monstrosity. "Classified, Beatrice," I said with a shrug. "Top secret, can't tell you. National security, you know? But hey, on the plus side, I'm getting amazing reception. All the local channels crystal clear. The game, man, the game looks fantastic." Beatrice just stood there, speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a freaking fish out of water. Then, she turned and stomped off, muttering about legal action and community standards and the downfall of civilization as we know it. The emergency HOA meeting, Part 2, the Signal Showdown, was predictably a freaking disaster. For Beatrice, that is. For me, It was pure, unadulterated entertainment. The HOA had already begun drafting new rules to try and ban it, but they were too late. Beatrice, looking like she'd aged 10 years in a week, probably from the stress of staring at my satellite array, was in full-on meltdown mode. This monstrosity, she declared, pointing a shaky finger at a rather impressive photo of my communications hub, is a disgrace. It's a violation of every rule, every standard, every aesthetic principle of Crystal Creek Meadows. She'd even brought in a communications expert, some guy in a suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, who testified about the potential dangers of unregulated satellite dishes and the interference they could cause with, well, with everything. Then, it was my turn. Time for the Mike O'Malley defense, baby. Beatrice, I said, standing up and addressing the board, who, by this point, looked like they were questioning their entire existence, seems to be under the impression that I've, somehow, broken the law. I haven't. I laid it all out, nice and slow. I cited the FCC rule, showing them in black and white that I had a right to receive broadcast signals. I showed them the previous HOA bylaws, pointing out that there was nothing about satellite dishes, only unsightly antennas. And I emphasized, repeatedly, that my communications hub was for research. I even presented some research data, which was basically just a bunch of random numbers and graphs I'd made up. Hey, it looked impressive. And besides, I added with a shrug, it's not harming anyone. It's just receiving signals. Lots and lots of signals. The board members. They were all over the place. Some were still clinging to Beatrice's side, nodding along with her every insane rant. Others were looking at me, then at the photo of my array, then back at me, like they were trying to decide if I was a genius or a madman. And a few, I swear, were secretly taking notes, probably planning their own satellite setups. Then, a guy in the back, a local ham radio operator, stands up. Look, he says, I know a thing or two about antennas, and this guy, he's not breaking any laws. Yeah, it's unconventional, but it's all perfectly legal. And, honestly, it's kind of impressive. That was the final nail in Beatrice's coffin. The board, facing a potential lawsuit, a public relations nightmare, and the undeniable fact that I was technically within my rights, voted to table the discussion. They couldn't do anything. The meeting ended in chaos. Beatrice was screaming. The communications expert was packing up his briefcase, and I was walking out with a grin so big it probably violated some HOA rule about excessive facial expressions. But Beatrice, like a particularly persistent and signal-blocking weed, wasn't about to give up. The signal wars had begun. Beatrice tried everything. She filed complaints with the city claiming my array was a safety hazard, a zoning violation, a freaking public nuisance. The city inspectors came. They looked. They shrugged. Looks like he's got all the permits, one of them said. And it's not blocking any sidewalks. So, we're good. She tried to get a petition going, circulating this thing around the neighborhood, claiming my array was attracting aliens. Seriously, aliens. You know how many signatures she got? 2, and one of them was from her cat. Again, she even, I suspect, tried to sabotage my setup. One morning I found a bunch of tinfoil wrapped around one of my dishes. Tinfoil, like that was going to do anything. I just took a picture of it, posted it on social media, and captioned it, Beatrice's latest attempt to disrupt my research hash fail. And I, of course, retaliated. In my own special way. I added more scientific instruments to my array. A giant windsock shaped like a satellite dish, a fake radar gun pointed directly at Beatrice's house. A sign that read, Area 51B, keep out. I set up a control center in my garage. I got a bunch of old computers, monitors, and electronic equipment, from a local recycling center, of course, hooked them all up, and made it look like I was, controlling something. I even put up a big screen with a constantly scrolling display of random numbers and symbols. I started hosting science nights for the neighborhood kids. I'd show them my communications hub, explain, in completely made-up terms, how it all worked, and let them play with the non-functional equipment in my control center. The kids loved it. Their parents? They were starting to think I was some kind of neighborhood hero. I even started a rumor that I was in contact with extraterrestrial life, that my satellite array was actually a communication device for talking to aliens. Hey, Beatrice started it. And just for good measure, I got a vanity license plate for my car. It read Skynet. I also started charging the public $5 a pop for a tour. It was a freaking sideshow, man. A circus of science and spite. And I was the ringmaster. Beatrice was losing it. The neighborhood was entertained, and my TV reception was amazing.